gentlemen, welcome. Very glad to see everyone here today. Thank you for making it out. I will be opening us with a quick announcement about course-related logistics. I'll be passing around some flyers related to the presentation here today. I invite you to write your name and the name of your instructor and your course number on that if you're here for academic credit or for class attendance. So I'll be passing those around today. Make sure you get one. And welcome to the folks who are watching at home on our live stream or in Central 1114. 114, this is 1117. So glad that we have people here. I'd like to thank first Dr. Karen Lawler, our department chair, for the resources provided for this event, as well as Jim Furr, who is managing our live stream and the broadcast, and Jacqueline Kirby, who has helped with the logistics. We really couldn't do these kinds of things without those staff. So if you'll please join me in thanking them. I'm going to ask our student Myra Barone to talk about the undergraduate student group, new student group that is co-sponsoring this event, and Dr. Kedrowicz's visit with us today. Myra?
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Myra Barone, and I wanted to begin my presentation with a simple question. Who here has ever felt alone in the pursuit to higher education? This could be whether it's trying to figure out which classes to take, or which professors are the best, or simply just trying to navigate within this tri-campus. As a student at MSU Denver, I have once felt alone, discouraged, and helpless. And it wasn't until I found a friend and a fellow student where it gave me the enough confidence to pursue my educational goals. And it really validated my reason for me to be here. This fellow student was not only a classmate and a friend, she was my mentor. She talked me through classes, professors, parking, and gave me a reason to be here. And I realized that this relationship embodied a mentor-mentee relationship. The mentor-mentee relationship was necessary for my success as a communication student. This experience encouraged us to develop a mentoring program where all students could experience the same thing I experienced. This program is formally known as ComCadre. As you all may know, Cadre is the MSU core values. It stands for community, access, diversity, respect, and entrepreneurship. We believe that these traits are necessary in the mentorship program, and they exhibit the qualities that we want to instill in all students. Now, this mentoring program was originally developed as a student project in our organizational identity class with Dr. Kendall. The assignment was to use identity work to improve the organizational communication track. By using Lencioni's 6 critical questions for a healthy organization, collectively we've been able to use these questions to create a positive organizational change. These questions include, why do we exist? How do we behave? What do we do? How will we succeed? And what's most important right now, and who must do what? To begin, we first had to identify the larger issue. Can you believe that 5 years ago, MSU was classified as a college? So this means that MSU is an accredited university. Yet when I tell people that I go to Metro, there's typically 3 things that come to mind. One would be that it's a cheap school. 2 would be it's a commuter campus. And 3, it combines the traditional and the non-traditional student from all walks of life. This means that 5 years ago, MSU Denver has been trying to shift their identity from a college to the progressive path of a university. This brings me to my first question. Why do we exist? ComCadre Mentorship Program exists to create and foster a community, to shift the way we think about Metro, that wants to give people a reason to come, a reason to stay, and a reason to participate in a community. As mentors, ComCadre not only embodies the Cadre core values, but as an organization, we behave and communicate intellectually, emotionally, and socially. As mentors, we have the ability and value the ability to think intellectually, to be free-thinking, discursive, open, and most importantly, guiding. Emotionally, it shows true strength of character by being welcoming, caring, and positive. Lastly, we all at one point have felt alone. And socially, we have been, with the use of students that have been collaborative, interactive, and involved, this would not succeed. So at this point, you might be thinking this is all sweet and all, but what exactly are we trying to do? This mentoring program assists, welcomes, and supports first-year and transfer students in succeeding in their educational goals. If we were all able to time travel, we might have been able to give each other some advice when we first started college. Cadre wants to be able to provide students with all the available resources from the formal to informal. And with the help of upper-level students, we'll be able to achieve this. So I don't know about you guys, but I feel very passionate about this program. In order for us to succeed, we need the collective knowledge and passion of upper-level organizational communication students, and the assistance of the faculty, of course. Lencioni's fifth question, and probably one of the most ever-changing question, is what's most important right now? This question is vital to keeping organization alive and keeping us on our toes. So what's important right now? At this exact moment, it's establishing a strong foundation and creating awareness. That's why I'm here today. I wanted to share with you all my experience, and I wanted to continue and display that how we can all continue to learn and maybe, just maybe, get you all excited as well. At the beginning of this semester, I've been so grateful to have had the opportunity to collaboratively work with some amazing individuals. So, last question, who must do what? This is more as a quick shout out. Mitch, who wasn't able to attend today, he's the vice president and the biggest supporter of organizing this program. He has done extensive research in mentoring programs and developing how we can all become mentors. Kevin, he is our secretary, who is also not here. With all his patience and craziness of the semester, he has continued to develop training to help our interpersonal skills. Christina, she's one of the girls who first developed this program with us. Christina has provided the right insight to develop a strategic recruitment plan. Raylan, also one of our original teammates, she has developed and researched marketing techniques that we can use in this program. In spirit, Madison Bush. You heard how our friendship started, and I'm very proud to say that she continues my journey in higher education. Again, my name is Mayra Badron. I'm the president of Cadres, and I want to end my presentation with a statement. You are investing in your own future by investing in the future of MSU Denver. Thank you. And to present our keynote speaker, Raylan DeLay.
Hello, everyone. My name is Raylan DeLay, as Myra said. I am currently a senior here at MSU Denver studying organizational communication. And it's such an honor to be here today to be able to introduce Dr. Kedrowicz. Dr. Kedrowicz is currently developing a 3-year preclinical communication for DVM students, which is veterinary medicine students, at North Carolina State University. She is the former director of the CLEAR program at the University of Utah, which is an integrated, discipline-specific engineering communication initiative. And much of her experience includes faculty development, teacher training, instructional development, and assessment. She has many published works, including Measuring Factors That Influence Decisions to Become a Veterinarian, Engineering Communication in the Global Workplace, Preparing Professionals and Global Citizens, and Professional Identity on the Web, Engineering Blogs and Self-Presentation. These are to just name a few. However, my favorite work by her would have to be the research on exploring belief in an animal afterlife. This is basically stating that 73% of people who believe in an afterlife also believe in an afterlife for animals. This can and will affect how clients treat the decisions they make about their pets. Then providing the need for veterinarians to explore and acknowledge client perspectives. Today we'll be hearing some more great work, so please, without further ado, help me welcome Dr. Kedrowicz.
Thank you. The animal afterlife study is so new. I commend you for finding that on and talking about that. It's a pleasure to be with you this afternoon. I really appreciate you spending an hour with me. This is an opportunity opportunity for me to really pull all of my research and teaching interests in professional communication and identity together, and so it was a pleasure to pull this together for all of you. I'd like to begin by sharing a story with you. 3 years ago, I made the long journey from Salt Lake City, Utah to Raleigh, North Carolina to start a new position at NC State in the College of Veterinary Medicine. And as any of you who may have moved or have heard stories about people who have relocated, when you relocate, one of the first things you need to do is find new professionals that you can rely on. So you need a new doctor, you need a new dentist, you might need a new hairstylist, and you probably also need a new mechanic. So, of course, when I moved, I set out to find all of these new professionals. Started by taking my car to the dealership, because that's what I always did in Salt Lake City. After a few less than satisfactory experiences at the dealership, and having them tell me that now my car needed a major repair that was going to cost something in the realm of $3,000, I decided, I think I need a second opinion. So I did what any good consumer does, right? And I hit the World Wide Web and started looking for reviews of places. And after looking through several websites, I happened upon a place, and I started to read the reviews. And the reviews were glowing. Every single one of them. 5 stars out of 5 stars. This place is great. Justin is the man. He'll help you save your car. You won't need car payments because he can do it efficiently and, affordably for you. So many positive reviews, in fact, that I thought, is this for real? Or does he have a bunch of friends going online writing these positive reviews? But I thought, okay, good reviews, close to my house. I need someone who can do this job for less than $3,000. I'm going to give it a shot. So I called up. Justin was wonderful on the phone. He was able to get me in the next day. I took my car in there. I was warmly greeted. He explained everything to me clearly. He gave me a clear written estimate. I was able to see him interact with his team in a way that communicated to me that they respected him. They enjoyed where they were working. They got the work done efficiently. They did it for $2,000 less. And I felt truly like Justin cared that I understood everything that he was doing to my car. So long story short, right, after this experience of finding Justin on the internet and taking my car there and being really happy, it's now 4 years later. I still go see Justin for everything. I've recommended Justin to many colleagues who have gone to take their cars there. And I have developed a really long-lasting positive relationship with him. So why do I share this story with you, right? Why am I talking about a mechanic when I'm here to talk about competent communication and professional identity? I share this story with you because it does not matter what you do. It does not matter what service you provide. It does not matter what discipline you are in. The communication is what's going to set you apart. So competent communication matters if you're a mechanic, if you're a doctor, if you're a veterinarian, if you're an engineer, if you're a manager, if you go into marketing. That is what's going to set you apart from everyone else, because the assumption is that you're going to come out of school with a baseline competency of whatever the technical field is that you're in. That's assumed. It's assumed that Justin has credentials, right? He can be a good mechanic. But can he communicate in ways that's going to develop a strong personal relationship based on trust and credibility? So today, I'm going to talk about how you can be an active participant in your professional identity development. Do not leave it to chance. If you do, your identity will be developed for you through what other people say about you, through how other people communicate with you in terms of mediated communication. So my objective for you at the end of this presentation is for you to understand how to actively construct a cohesive professional identity that will span mediated communication, formal professional communication, whether that's speaking or writing, as well as interpersonal communication and collaborative communication as part of a team. So I have 3 examples of people here, 2 that I think have probably been active in their professional identity development in terms of fostering a cohesive identity, in terms of web presence, right? Their writing, publication, what we know about them, and then maybe 1 who let the professional identity stuff get away a little bit, right? So if we think about of these 3 people who we might feel like we have an understanding of who they are and of their level of trustworthiness, remembering what happened to Lance Armstrong when that trust eroded, right? So trust, credibility, be active in that, and do that through your communication. Communication really is the key. That's how you build trust, and that is how you communicate your credibility. So I'm going to keep coming back to those two themes. So today we'll talk specifically, as I mentioned, about 3 key areas of communication: electronic professionalism and boundary regulation. So everything is about, right, social media nowadays. How can you be active in making sure that you're using that to your advantage? We'll also talk about the professional presentation of ideas, whether, again, that is through your oral presentation or through documentation. And then finally, I'm going to focus on relationship-centered interactions. So my whole approach to working with colleagues, whether that's interpersonally or working as part of a committee or part of a group, is to really develop those strong professional relationships, and to do that through my communication. Specifically, my ability to listen, not so much my ability to talk, which is what we think of when we think of communication. My ability to empathize or take perspective of other people, and my ability to communicate assertively. And so that's what's meant by fostering relationship-centered interactions. Before we move into electronic professionalism, please, if at any time you have questions or comments, we don't need to wait till the end. I'd rather have this be more of a dialogue. So if something is pressing, stop me and I will absolutely go to your questions. So electronic professionalism is our first broad topic today. So how many of you have a Facebook profile? How many of you think that Facebook profile is private and secure, and only the people that you want to see you can see you? Right? Exactly. How many of you think it's fair for potential employers to vet you via Facebook, to Google you and see what comes up? Okay, yeah, a few of you. So it should come as no surprise then that consistently when professionals are asked, do you vet potential employees via Facebook? About 70%, anywhere between 60 and 75%. Consistently, that's what the data shows. So you can be sure that the next time you're applying for, whether that's an internship or some sort of position, that the likelihood of you being vetted in terms of what they can find on you with respect to social media, that's going to happen. So here's some interesting statistics for you. In pharmacy, right, pharmacy students were asked, do you portray an image that you would want a future employer to see? About 45% of those students openly admitted that they're probably not portraying an image that they would be okay with other people seeing professionally, right? Despite the fact that we know that this is happening. So the first thing to remember is that your private lives are in fact available for public consumption, even if you think you have the highest privacy settings. And not only does this affect you personally in terms of your professional identity, but the way that you portray yourself on social media can have damaging repercussions for the profession that you go into as a whole. Perceived anonymity can be very damaging, right? So here we have a picture of a veterinarian. This is the image we have. Veterinarians, by the way, consistently rank among the most trustworthy professions of any. And a few years ago, a recent graduate in Texas, veterinarian was practicing in Texas, took to her personal Facebook page and decided to make a post. This is what she posted. My first bow kill, LOL. The only good feral tomcat is one with an arrow through its head. Vet of the Year award gladly accepted. Now I should tell you, what I did not include on this slide, that I have included when I share this information with my DVM students, there was an image to accompany this post. So she had someone take a picture of her showing what she had done. And she thought, right, this is my personal page. It's private. Nothing bad can come of this. Other people that she thought were friends got wind of this, and slowly it started to be shared. So it is not just about your settings. It's about the people that you trust to have access to your page. That gets shared. Pretty soon, this goes viral. Now, this is damaging for this veterinarian. It's damaging for the clinic where she practices. So she was promptly fired. And it has potentially very damaging consequences for the profession of veterinary medicine, which is, again, viewed as very trustworthy. So this particular veterinarian lost her license to practice in the state of Texas for 1 year. Many in the veterinary community think that that was not enough for what happened here because of how damaging this can be. So I share that as an example of how, despite the fact that you might think this is your personal page. There is a way for that to be shared. The other thing I should mention is she thought this was a feral cat, and it wound up being a neighbor's cat. So that adds another layer of sort of what happened here. So privacy is tenuous. That's the lesson, right? Everybody has one of these now. Everybody. So when things are happening, it can be caught on camera and shared, right? We saw what just happened on United Airlines. And I flew United Airlines out here, which was interesting. So there were some haha jokes. The person sitting in front of me turned around and said, I hope the flight's not overbooked. We're flying United, right? Privacy is tenuous. That's the message. So what can you do? What should you do in terms of being proactive with respect to mediated communication? So it's important to engage in boundary regulation, and I'll talk a little bit about what that is, and e-professionalism. So take active steps. Am I advocating that you do not have a personal Facebook page that you use to share things with friends? Absolutely not. I have a personal Facebook page that, I have very few professional colleagues are linked with me on Facebook because I try and separate that. That's what's known as boundary regulation. So if it's important to you to have that private outlet for expression, have it, but make sure that you're very clear about who has access to that and set your privacy settings as high as you possibly can. And then consider engaging in very directed outreach by creating a professional social media presence. So it might be a separate page, it might be your Twitter, it might be LinkedIn, which I know is not something that a lot of people use because it's been around a long time, but it's really one of the only platforms we have right now in terms of creating that professional space. And make sure that what you're posting, what you're sharing, if you're blogging, right, that you think about who you are, what you do, what makes you unique, and how best to communicate that through those channels. Any questions about that? Anybody have any other fun stories about how social media has gone awry? Yes?
What sort of recommendation or response would you have to people who say, should I just give up on electronic media altogether?
I would say not do that at all, because that's really where people are going to learn about you. People go to social media. So again, I think it is that very active construction of your identity and finding the appropriate platform to do that. So I have Twitter also. So Facebook is my private. I do that. I do a little bit of that boundary regulation. Facebook is sort of my private for fun, sharing pictures and where I've traveled and things like that. But then I have a LinkedIn, and I go to it pretty regularly, right? Make sure that it's updated. I have Twitter. Twitter is professional. I view that as part of what I should do as a communication professional is to use Twitter in a professional manner. So Twitter is professional. I have some that are set up specifically for academics that I go to. And I make sure that the way that I am presenting myself is cohesive across all of those platforms. I am not a blogger, but if you are a blogger, that is another platform that you can use. The closer you get to wanting to seek employment, the less you should actually engage in that boundary regulation. So there's data to support that it can be trickier. So if you're thinking that you're going to be on the market soon, you might want to consider not trying to have one foot in the private and one foot in the professional and really focus on that professional identity. Yeah, that's the advice I would give. All right, so let's shift focus a little bit and talk about the presentation of your ideas professionally, whether that is through writing or through speaking. So first of all, your writing is a reflection of you. Whatever service you provide, your writing is an extension of that service. I teach my DVM students that the discharge instructions that you write, right, that is an extension of medical care. So you should take that very seriously. Your writing absolutely is a reflection of you as a professional. And people make attributions about you as a person based on your writing. So there's research to support this. For example, would any of you want to be known as someone who's hasty, who rushes through things, maybe somebody who's careless, doesn't have attention to detail, or is a faulty thinker? Probably not. That is not the professional identity that you want. Yet there is research to show that professionals across all disciplines, banking, healthcare, aerospace, that your writing is a reflection of you. Errors, things like sentence fragments, misspellings, right? Other grammatical and syntactical errors, leads professionals to make attributions about you in these ways. So I spent 15 years teaching engineering students, and engineering students notoriously thought, oh, it doesn't matter if there's errors in there, it's just about the idea, right? And so I had to communicate to them, do you want to be known as the engineer who doesn't have attention to detail? Like, oops, I'm off a little bit in that calculation, sorry, the bridge might fall down. You don't want to be known as that person. So think about your writing in that way. Additionally, think about the values that you communicate through your writing, beyond just error. Do you want to be known as someone who is a clear communicator? If you do, think about how to organize your writing so that it communicates that value of clarity. Do you want to be known as someone who can make decisions quickly, who can get the job done efficiently? Is that something you pride yourself on? If so, think about how to organize your writing in ways that communicate that value so that the reader can access the information very efficiently. So it's not just errors. Then think about the impact of the current culture around communication, texting, tweeting, right? Only so many characters. Think about the impact that that has on your ability to write, right? We speak in LOL, OMG, right? Emoticons, we do that. We're texting all the time. We're tweeting. That has impacted the way in which people write. There's been a lot of work that's looked at this, particularly among students who are graduating from college now. So be aware of that. Make a conscious effort to think about who your audience is, what values you want to communicate with your writing, and pay attention to those details because they matter. So impress with writing clarity. A lot of malpractice in medicine comes from miscommunication in the form of writing. It's important to be clear. Think about what your purpose is. Think about the 2 or 3 key things. Chunk it together. Again, you're communicating implicitly your values, who you are as a professional. What is your professional identity? Same thing with presentations. I'm so glad none of you are looking like this right now, right? But I know you've all been in a room where you have sat through a presentation and you have felt like this, right? And just like with your writing, your oral presentation skills are a direct reflection of you as a professional. You could imagine, right, things that you might be thinking about me as a communication professional if I stood behind here and I had slides that looked like this and I read them to you. This is the first point of my talk. I will read this material to you, so don't bother reading it. Or, similarly, if I did something like this, right? We see this. This is why PowerPoint has such a bad rap, because people aren't using it in a way that is appropriate for the audience. So that is why, right, presentations are so important. I have taught public presentation in some capacity for well over 20 years. I have taught engineers. I have taught business students. I now teach DVM students. I do workshops with the USDA, right? So I am teaching people from government how to do this. It's really, really important. It's about establishing a connection. And again, communicating who you are, fostering your credibility. Remember, trust, credibility. This is where your credibility shines through in your ability to communicate your ideas professionally. There's been a big shift, too, in what our expectations are in terms of professional presentations. It is not so much open up PowerPoint and prepare those slides and have some bullet points on there. How many of you watch TED Talks? Yes, absolutely. Why do you like TED Talks?
Honest.
They're honest, so that gets at a credibility issue. What else do you like about TED Talks?
They're engaging and interesting.
Absolutely. Even if it might be a topic that you're not super interested in or excited about, they're engaging and interesting. That has changed, right? The expectations for audience members. So it's not about just relaying that information. It's about thinking about that audience, right? Who are you talking to? How are you going to connect with them? What do you hope they get out of it? It's about having that conversation, fostering that connection. So it's like fostering a relationship, even though it's one to many. Again, think about the people. You might say, yeah, but not every topic is super interesting. This was a favorite critique I heard from my engineering students and even my engineering faculty members. Yeah, but we're engineers. Nothing about engineering is exciting or engaging, and I would say that's simply not true. There are no boring topics, there are only boring presenters. And I firmly believe that. It is true across disciplines. You can make things exciting, right? We have astrophysicists, right? Scientists making things that might appear to be very complex or outside the realm of what we are interested in, and they do it in a way that reels us in. So expectations about how to communicate orally, professionally have changed, and it's important to be aware of that. So I always tell whoever I'm training, whether that's professionals or students, to wow them with your engaging style. Now, does that mean that I think the content doesn't matter? It's all about making it really pretty and fun, and if you got some content in there, that's good. No. Again, the content should be a given. You should spend a lot of time on those ideas because they matter. But then it's about really thinking, how am I going to make the connection with this audience? What questions might they have about what I'm going to be talking about? How can I make it resonate with them? And spending the time to do due diligence. So for this presentation in particular, I was telling Katie and Brendan, I give talks all the time about a variety of topics that in some way relate to professional communication. And this one took, weeks. I spent weeks preparing this talk, right? An hour-long talk to students and some faculty members here, and I just kept thinking, oh, geez, okay, professional communication and identity, and what are they going to want to know? What's going to be most useful for this audience? Spent a lot of time with those ideas, but then I had to do the extra hard work. How am I going to engage people? What examples might I use that would resonate? What stories can I share? Because it's all about the power of narrative, using narrative to create that connection. Also consider that people have limited attention spans, 7 to 10 minutes. We've been going now for a while, 36, although that hasn't all been me. People have limited attention spans. So about every 10 minutes, I try and find a way to do something to get you back. It's incumbent upon me, again, as the professional, to communicate my credibility and to keep you with me from beginning to end. Whether that's a little bit of movement, asking a question, sharing another story, right? All of this goes into preparing engaging presentations that are only going to enhance your credibility. If it comes down to you and the person next to you, and there's a promotion, and one of you can do great engaging presentations and write well, and one of you can't, who do you think is going to get that promotion?
How do you translate that kind of authenticity, you're talking about clarity, with presentations towards a LinkedIn profile or a digital portfolio? Like what do you see as the content that makes that transition?
So your question would be from sort of oral presentation, professional presentation, and then making that available on LinkedIn, or are you asking more about how do you engage people on a LinkedIn profile?
Instead of, I guess I'm thinking, if you're going to have good, clear content on your resume, you're going to present
Yes.
that in a job interview, how do you translate that to your LinkedIn profile? That clarity, that narrative style, like what does that look like?
Well, I think that's exactly what it would look like. So LinkedIn, I'll use that as an example since that's what you asked, and that is the most common professionally. LinkedIn has done a really good job of sort of creating sections, so you can put things like projects that you're currently working on. You also have the About Me page. So the About Me, I write first-person narrative. So I think first-person narrative is probably one of the most powerful ways you can do that. You can translate that, right? This is who I am. I am a communication faculty member specializing in professional communication. This is what I've done. These are the results that I've had with this. And then I can put my CV, right, or my resume up there if people want to get the details. But I think that first person is really what's most powerful. And taking full advantage of the platform and putting that first person in there anywhere you can. Yeah, that's a great question.
Students often ask me around these kinds of things about how do I do it, as if there's like a single answer or a single way to do this. Sam's question about authenticity made me think, how do you deal with the fact that we're all rather different people, and so how do I be me professionally, but also do that in an appropriate way to my audience? Do you have recommendations for how do I make that happen rather than just be yourself? What's the step beyond that to be a professional self if there's no one right way to do it?
Just across the board, are you asking? How do I be a professional, my best professional version of me?
I was thinking in particular about the speaking style, and public speaking style, but any one of the platforms or mediums.
So I think in terms of professional presentations, you have to find what's comfortable for you. So I always tell people when I provide training, I will go through tips and techniques, right? These are the steps I would take if I was preparing a presentation. And that's beyond the scope of this particular talk, but I actually do have a formal 8 steps that I walk people through. And we talk about how to use those steps to get all the content together. And then from there, I always say, find what's working for you and what's comfortable. So not everybody is comfortable with this style, right? Some people just are not. Some people are more comfortable, with this style. And it's not that this style is necessarily worse than that style. Where I think your authenticity shines through is in your confidence and in your comfort, right? So the more confident you are, the more that you are true to yourself, the easier it will be for you. It won't feel like you're forcing, right, or scripting or acting in some way. So I am not an advocate of scripting anything. I'm not an advocate of scripting particular presentations because what happens is if we memorize it all and we forget our spot, oh my goodness, now what? So I don't advocate scripting of professional presentations. That does not mean I'm not an advocate of preparation, right, and practice, 2 different things. So I'm not an advocate of scripting of professional presentations. I'm also not an advocate of scripting interpersonal interactions. And that's a question that my DVM students ask me a lot. Can I just script this? Can I have my standard introduction when I walk in the room and I meet a client for the first time? Can I just have my standard list of questions and then my canned response for the most common questions I get? And that'll be great, it'll work, and I'll feel comfortable. And my response is always no, because each client is different, and it's about developing that authentic interpersonal relationship. Because that's really what it's about in terms of communicating competently, being true to yourself, yes, developing that relationship that's built on trust. Did you have a question?
Yeah, so like me, my major's communication and rhetoric, so
yeah.
You're saying that 7 to 10 minutes is like the average span of people's attention. How would you, if you were to give a speech on let's say global warming or something like that, would you, I guess, use transitions in a way to kind of bring them back, or would you use more of shocking statistics, or just kind of ways to get involved, or?
All good, yes, all of the above. I would do all of that. So in general, some of the most common techniques would be, yes, to use those very clear transitions. And I do workshops with, this is part of what I do when I train government employees with the USDA. We talk about purposeful transitions. We talk about that not only maybe in a slide, and you saw that I have some purposeful transitions, right, for headings. Now we're moving on to the next topic. You can say it orally. You can also do it physically. So nonverbal communication is also really important. It's a part of who you are. So I always tell people if they are uncomfortable moving, right, to get to your question, it's a way to get people back. Start your presentation in the center. Move on to the next point by moving over here. It's very subtle, but just this little bit of movement can trigger people to come back and focus. Because the brain has a lot of processing power. No one speaks at the number of words per minute that the brain can process information. So it's very easy for all of a sudden, oh, I'm thinking about this other thing, right? So movement is a nice way, good transitions, good signposts, a picture, moving on to the next slide, sharing a story. All of those communicative techniques are good strategies for bringing people back about every 10 minutes. They also work in your writing, right? And it's important to have very clear, organized writing. Again, that's part of your identity, how you want people to know you. Wow, this person is very succinct, writes very clearly. All of that adds to your credibility as a professional. Other questions before we move on? Yeah.
What if my authentic self isn't really professional? I don't want to script my Facebook. I just want to be me. And that is my definition of professional.
Then I think that if that is truly how you feel about it, and you don't want to script your Facebook, and you don't want to put the time and the effort in to do that, then that's okay. But then I think be prepared for the repercussions of that. That's how I would answer that question. That's a great question. Does anybody have any other ideas for how you would do that if you don't want to be a professional? And you...
I was actually talking about this with Dr. Kendall recently. I'm developing a time management training for my internship. And you know, I'm not a traditional kind of person. You know, on Facebook, my name is Rebel. You know, I like to do things my own way, and I like to kind of cause a stir and disrupt a little bit. So I don't necessarily see myself as a professional, but I do definitely exist in a professional world. So I can still be my authentic self and bring my voice into my training. So what I decided to do was create a theme of kind of social justice and empowerment around time management, and include keywords like choice and freedom, control, and
Excellent.
things like that. So I can bring some of my rebellious, authentic, unprofessional self into a more professional environment and setting.
Absolutely. That's a beautiful example. I think it's also important to recognize that where you might aspire to be, right, and what you aspire to do. Again, this is the important thing. Who do you want to be, right? What do you do that's unique? What makes you who you are? What are your values? So considering those questions and then finding a way to communicate that is authentic to you, and recognizing that, you know, there might be some audiences for whom that is not going to resonate, but there might be others where it does. And, you know, you might actually find yourself working in an organization where the more rebellious side, the non-traditional communication around professional identity is okay. It's in fact celebrated and recommended, and that's fine too. So again, you know, I think underlying all of this, it is both about who you are, but it is also about who you are communicating to, right? Who is that audience? Who are you trying to reach? You're probably not going to want to go work at a really stuffy corporation, right, where everyone is in really conservative suits, from what I hear. So you don't want to talk to those people anyway, right? So if they see your professional profile and they think, that's not going to work for us, that's probably okay, because that's not going to work for you either. Yeah, it's a really nice example. All right, so let's shift our focus a little bit from your mediated presence, right, you being very proactive in some way, constructing yourself, whether that's online or through your professional presentation of ideas, to what it means to be relationship-centered. So all of my work now with DVM students really builds on this notion of being relationship-centered in your communication. And all that really means is that relationships are valuable. We should try to cultivate authentic relationships with people. That emotions are very much a part of those relationships. And that relationships are mutually influencing. So you've probably heard these concepts in some form or another in your communication courses, right? There's nothing new here. But this really is the foundation that I share with my DVM students, but I think it's a foundation that works no matter the industry that you're in, right? Part of the reason I have the same mechanic after 4 years and that I tell everyone I know they should go see him is because we have developed a genuine relationship built on trust and credibility. So I mentioned earlier that the three kind of core, what I consider to be core skills from which everything else can sort of emanate and build is your listening, your ability to empathize or engage in perspective taking, and your ability to communicate assertively. So if you can think about those three things with every interaction you have, you'll be well on your way to success toward cultivating those genuine professional relationships. Your competence in communication has very little to do, in fact, with the way that you communicate with other people. So if I'm having a conversation, people will judge me as a competent communicator, not so much on my ability to talk with them and have a conversation, but on my ability to listen. There's been a lot of research that's looked at this. So listening and listening-related abilities, right? Understanding someone else, being able to take perspective. That is how people judge whether or not you are a competent communicator. Less about what you say, more about how you listen. Now, you probably all think you're pretty good listeners, yeah? Good listeners. Communication students, some communication faculty members, right? I mean, I'm going to be pretty honest with you. I'm an okay listener. I mean, I work really hard at it. I still have to work really hard at it, even though I'm up here telling you this is really, really important. And it is. You have to work at it. So consider this. There's been work that has looked at students and how well students listen. So students who have been told The next 30 minutes, I'm going to be sharing information with you, and you are going to be tested on this information. 50%, about 50% of students are able to recall information, even though they've been explicitly told, I'm going to talk for 30 minutes, you're going to be tested on it. Not so good. Studies that have looked at groups, right? People working together in industry. People can paraphrase what has been said during a 1-hour meeting only about 50% of the time. So imagine what that does if you're working on a project together, for example, and you only are getting 50% of the information. Topics get changed rapidly. I'm sure you've encountered this when you've worked in groups. Sometimes people will say something and that idea no one ever comes back. We don't link ideas, so there's not a lot of coherence, right? This is what the data shows us. So what I would say is really listen. So we say, yep, I'm an okay listener. Really listen, because we're not as good at it as we think. We do this. I'm great at this. Any guesses at what this is? Yeah, well, I might be daydreaming. This is me when I'm really earnest about, yes, I'm listening to you. This is what's known as pseudo-listening. Some of you might be doing it right now, right? You're great at communicating non-verbally to me, that you are with me. You might even be nodding your head a little bit. But if I were to ask you, what did I say 5 minutes ago? May or may not be able to tell me. So this is why, because we're really good at faking it. Letting people know. Why do we do this? Because we think we can multitask. So I can let you know I'm sort of listening, but maybe, and this is the daydreaming, right? I'm focusing on these other things I have to do. Now sometimes that might be because the person in front of you is not engaging you and making that connection, which we talked about being so important. But sometimes it's because you are not doing the hard work to listen. Sometimes it's this. Oh, I really want to listen, but I'm really feeling the tug here. I think my phone went off and I might have received a text. So we do that. It's easy to get distracted. And then my favorite, I used to be like this, but I'm not anymore because I try really hard to shut it down. This is the silent arguer, right? Or the person who's already forming the response. So instead of really just stopping and focusing non-verbally, putting those distractions away, engaging in good attending skills. So orienting my body towards you as you're speaking, making good eye contact with you, setting other things aside. That's really listening. Listening for key ideas. And then being able to reflect back. So when you really listen, you should be able to paraphrase in some way what that person has just communicated to you. Not only the words they said, but what it means for them or how it makes them feel, right? And that's getting in a little bit to the empathy piece too, which is so important. We're not so good at this. Empathy is hard, listening is hard, empathy is hard. And these are probably two of the skills that will be most important to you being able to communicate that you are trustworthy and to build that really strong professional relationship. So that brings me to the second key skill in terms of interpersonal relationships, as well as teamwork, which is really the ability to engage in some perspective taking. This is true not only for DVMs or managers. This is true for everyone, right? This is true for Justin, my mechanic. If I go in there and all of a sudden he says to me, and it's going to be $1,500, and he sees me go, oh, I know, it's a lot. I can imagine that's really difficult. So let's talk about why it's that much, right? That's empathy. That's understanding what the roadblocks might be. This is incredibly powerful if you're engaging in dialogue and maybe some conflict from time to time too. The ability to empathize will take you far. Listen, empathize. Develop that authentic, trusting relationship. And then finally, in terms of your actual communication, being an assertive communicator. Feel pretty good about what it means to be assertive? Yeah, maybe? All right, let's talk a little bit, briefly. So here's our continuum. We've got passive, assertive, aggressive, and then my favorite, the passive aggressive. Whenever I talk about assertive communication, I often have someone in the audience that says, what does it really mean to be passive aggressive? right? So we'll talk a little bit about that. So passive people, right? These are the people that just can't say no. They sort of, you think about them as like they get talked over. Their voice is not really heard, right? Their perspective is not taken into account. Usually the aggressive people are the ones who have no problem railroading over these passive people, right? These are the my way or the highway people. Passive people and aggressive people, it's hard to work with those folks. Have you worked with those folks on teams? I'm sure you have. It can be hard. So instead, it's about being assertive. And assertive, again, is self-respect, empathy, listening. The passive-aggressive, right, this is passive in communication and aggressive in actions. You say one thing, you do another. Someone asks you what you think. I think we're doing great in this group project. Then you go away and you find someone else that's on your team and you start telling them, wow, Joe had a really stupid idea today. We're not doing that. How effective do you think that's going to be the next time you come together and work together as a team? When you bring different ideas, when you bring different expertise, this can be really problematic. So I have found my ability to listen and empathize to be the strongest assets throughout my career, truly, because I've always worked outside of my discipline. So I have had to work really hard to take the perspective of engineers, for example, when they tell me communication's not hard. People talk every day. I write every day. It's totally easy. We don't need a class on that. What could you possibly teach me? I'm an engineer, right? I'm way smarter than communication. We build bridges and stuff. You talk. These are all things that I've heard before, right? What could you possibly have to offer me in my role as an engineer? So then I say, okay, so if I'm hearing you correctly, you feel like you have a pretty good handle on this. You might not think that this is a priority. Is that correct? Is that fair to say? Yes. I can see how you'd say that. Let me give you my perspective and then communicate it in an assertive way, right? Clearly, concisely, succinctly. Yes. Brandon.
Can you give us your perspective on that? I mean, we have a majority communication majors and minors
Yep.
in the room.
Yep.
If they do end up working in a, for pastoral logistics downtown, how would they talk about their role as a, communicator in an organization like that?
So if you ever find yourself in a position, and you likely will, right, where you are working with people who do not have the same background as you, and these might be people that do not necessarily understand what you do, right, or have a whole lot of respect for what you do, typically my experience has been that those kinds of comments come from just a lack of understanding. So I view that as an opportunity for me to say, okay, well, let me share with you what I think I can offer, right? Here are the strengths that I bring to this experience, right? What other questions might you have about communication? What might you tell me more about why you think this isn't valuable or useful for you? There's usually, if you keep going, if you keep asking those questions and you really keep listening and you keep trying to engage in that perspective taking, you'll eventually get to a place where you can try and find some common ground. So I had a faculty member shortly after I arrived at NC State, and I was developing this communication curriculum. And this faculty member not only didn't think that what I was doing was valuable, but actively was undermining what I was doing with other faculty colleagues and students, right? So saying things like, it's really too bad we can't spend more time on what I'm teaching you because we had to make room for that communication stuff that you don't really need anyway. And I found out about this because students told me. So my approach was not to do this, right? Not to be passive in communication, but active in my actions, right? Aggressive in my actions. That was not my approach. My approach also was not to necessarily confront this person directly and assertively. My approach was to engage in listening with this person, right? So what wound up happening is I needed some communication coaches. And this person thought, oh, I'm going to volunteer for this because I want to see what she's doing. It did not come from a space of goodwill, I want to support and help my colleague. It came from a space of, I want to get in there and find out so I have even more stuff I can use against this person. This is what happens in the real world. If you thought academia was any different than anywhere else, it's really not. So I welcomed this person. I said, this is great. Yes, come work with me, right? I developed a training. He participated. And I just sort of let him continue to think what he was going to think. And I did all the hard work of presenting myself every time I was in front of him, whether it was through the training, through emails that I sent him, that I was conveying that professional image of myself. What is my identity as a professional communicator? when we interacted, I listened. I didn't talk a whole lot because I wanted to understand his perspective. What slowly started happening, because I was building that trust, because I wasn't aggressive, I wasn't even overly assertive at this point. He'd come up to me after class and say, you know, I've been thinking, this communication stuff is actually pretty useful. I've used some of these things you've talked about in my own classes, in teaching, and it's working. And I would say, that's really great. I'm so happy to hear that. Do you have other ideas for things that we might do here from your experience that could be useful? So again, it was not me communicating something in particular. It was giving a space for this person to communicate all their fears and anxieties and presenting myself as a professional, listening, taking his perspective, responding with empathy, and then we got to a partnership where we could start to work together. But anytime you go in, you're going to try and railroad, that is not going to have positive consequences for you. It's really about showing that you want to get to know where this person's coming from and try to find a way to engage in dialogue that's going to get you both to a place you feel comfortable with. So again, express yourself, try to find that overlap, which is what I always do. Here are my objectives. Here's what I want to accomplish. Here's what I need. What do you need? What do you want to accomplish? What are your objectives? Where can we find some commonality there? It would be amazing if all we had to do was put this slide up in front of Congress, for example. This could be great. Find some of that overlap. We're not so good at this. We get really entrenched. Less talking, more listening, more empathy. Okay, and the final thing that I want to talk about for just a few minutes, and then we can open it up if there are additional questions, is that teamwork kills. So, by the way, this would be an example of how you could get attention back if I lost any of you. This is one of those attention-grabbing slides in my presentation. Poor teamwork kills, it really does. Right? You probably have all heard about this. I know you weren't alive when this happened. Challenger explosion, direct result of poor teamwork. There was a plane crash, I think it was back in the 80s. There was a plane coming from Columbia into JFK. The crew could not communicate effectively with air traffic control, so that we had two teams that were trying to communicate. The plane wound up being in a holding pattern for a long, long time. Fuel levels were running really low. They didn't know how to communicate cross-culturally in terms of this is an emergency. The plane crashed 20 miles outside of JFK and it killed everyone. Poor teamwork can have really powerful consequences. Poor teamwork is the leading cause of medical errors that lead to severe injury and death. So in medicine, poor teamwork kills. So hopefully, poor teamwork will not result in death in your career. But it has very real consequences. It has financial consequences. It has personal consequences for you, right? It can have professional consequences. No one likes to be a part of a team that is dysfunctional. So less me, more we, and more about process in order to be able to efficiently accomplish the task. A colleague of mine was tasked with being a part of a committee that was going to change the culture of an organization, right? So there were all these committees. One was a productivity committee, one was a teamwork committee, which is kind of funny, and then there was the communication committee, and all these people were tasked with, okay, you need to focus on how to improve communication in our organization. You need to focus on how to improve teamwork in our organization. So the teams convened, they got together, and it was like, okay, we are the communication team. Let's talk about how we're going to improve communication in this organization. And what happened immediately was, okay, yep, let's brainstorm. Everybody start throwing out ideas. Everybody started throwing out ideas. Everyone was talking over everyone. No one was listening. There was no sort of cohesiveness. And what actually wound up happening is it was incredibly frustrating for some of the people on that team, and the team ultimately fell apart. So there was no improvement in communication because the team tasked with improving communication didn't know how to communicate. Before jumping into the task, think a little bit about your process. Think a little bit about the strengths that everyone brings. Have a very purposeful conversation about that. When I put my students in teams, the first thing I tell them is, you need to have a discussion about the strengths and weaknesses. You need to talk about your preferred communication style. You need to set up some sort of contract or agreement for how you're going to work together. Formalize that. Get that stuff down and out of the way before you try to move on to actually solving the problem or accomplishing the task that you've been charged with. So process, task, balance. And then, of course, what I consider to be key foundation with teams, obviously it's this trust, so we come back to trust again. Open communication, equal participation, and constructive conflict. And truly, the way that you do all of these things is through your ability to listen, your ability to empathize, and your ability to communicate assertively. Speaking concisely, being succinct. Maximizing communication channels, maybe that's written communication. This is the way to help you be successful with teamwork. You're not going to constructively resolve conflict if you have an inability to listen and empathize with the other people that you're working with. It's just not going to work. It's the key foundation. And then the final point that I want to make with you is that it's wonderful to prioritize communication and to try and cultivate competent communication and a strong skill set for you. Just doing is not enough, however. So the next step is about really thinking, reflecting on how that went. So do it. What happened? What was the impact of that? And now what am I going to do better next time? If that's your writing, right? Oh, okay, that wasn't so clear. What could I have done better next time to communicate? If it's a presentation and you get videotaped, which I highly recommend, watch it, see how it went. All of our DVM students go through simulated client experiences. Those are recorded. They watch them. They reflect on it. They think about what they're going to do better next time. Your communication has never reached a state of competence where it's done. Your communication is always evolving. It's always in process. So engage in that reflection. What could I have done better? Sometimes it's just thinking about it. Sometimes it's much more formal. So in conclusion, be active in your professional identity development. There is so much more I would love to share with you, but in the limited time we have, my focus was to instill in you the importance of having a cohesive professional identity, whether that is through mediated communication, professional presentation of ideas, or those more interpersonal relationships that you can cultivate. So communication is your key. All you got to do is walk through the door.
Please join me in thanking Dr. Kedrowicz. Everyone, we have about 10 minutes for sort of an open question and answer period. I hope you'll pose some questions of Dr. Kedrowicz, and we'll have some time afterward as we're leaving and packing up the room before the next class as well. But anyone like to take the first question during this period?
Yes?
So can you give us a specific example of how you build trust in a team that you barely know, or how you've done so in a group you've worked with?
I think the most important way you can build trust with people that you don't know is to purposefully, at the very beginning, engage in some of those conversations about how you prefer to communicate, what strengths you bring to that team. So that's why I have my students do that. And I have them do some form of, you may have been exposed to this, some form of, this is my style when I'm part of a team. So some people are the task-oriented people. Some people are the collaborative people who really want to make sure that everybody's happy with how things are working. Some people are the devil's advocate, where they're always going to be a little bit contrary, right? So there's all these different personalities, different work styles, different communication styles. So one of the key things, I think, is having a frank discussion about, this is kind of how I am in a team. Based on prior experiences, this is how I work. This is how I communicate. I'm constantly going to be questioning, but that's not because I necessarily disagree. I just want to make sure that we have somebody that's going to keep us in check. So having that conversation, then I think having a clear process for how you're going to work together. I'm a big advocate of developing some sort of a team contract or a working agreement. Like the very first time you get together. We do this. Our dean is a big believer in this, so it's not just something that I have students do because it's busy work or it's something I can grade, which is what my engineering students often thought. This is just so you can grade us. It's to get you to have a conversation about expectations around participation, expectations around when we're going to check email, right? How many days are going to go by before that's acceptable? Expectations about where we're meeting, how long we're meeting, how we're going to run those meetings. So it's a way to sort of formalize, again, that process. So going through that, you're going to get to know someone much more quickly, and then I think follow through on what you say you're going to follow through on, and that's how people are going to trust you, by actually doing the things you say you're going to do, that accountability. But I think it has to be something that you do very purposefully to try and get to know. Icebreakers, right? Those are, we think about things that seem like, oh, really, icebreakers? We're gonna do an icebreaker, right? Do a uncommon commonalities, whatever sort of activity. That's how you're going to get to know and build that trust.
You said bad teamwork kills. So like in a situation where you had trust, like you just described, I know it might be conditional to the type of project and the team that you're with. What's kind of a general solution and how you can bring back that team together after this bad teamwork kills the production or the project?
Yeah, that's a great question. So how do you bring that bad team back after poor performance in some way? And again, that gets to that reflective piece. So having a discussion, right, and setting a meeting for that, I think. We're going to have an hour-long discussion about what happened on this project and where things broke down and what was the cause of those problems. So it's that reflective piece. What would we do differently? And this is something that's really common in the industry. A lot of times it's called the postmortem. So you have a postmortem after any project. Okay, what were the outcomes? What worked really well? Where did it break down? What were some of, what we saw as the problems that contributed to that? And what are we going to do to make sure that that doesn't happen next time? And having that frank discussion. But again, it's about creating that climate within the team where the open expression of ideas and respect and a willingness to really listen and engage, that's where you're going to be most successful with that. Yeah.
I just have a question. How do you deal with this silent person who's creating their argument? Because I've had so many class presentations where there's always that one person who will blatantly go against what I say and create an argument, for the opposing side. And it happens time after time again, and I feel like I lose my credibility because one, I get thrown off of my original point, and two, it's like they're sort of steering the boat, and I can't really get it back on.
Is this when you're in a team situation?
No,
or just any time?
Team, but during presentations.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, if I have a class where there's a team, you present as a team, and whenever my team goes up, it's there's always this one person, or whoever it may be, that has something specific to say. And you can see it on their face when they get what they want and they go after that. And it's just hard for me to sort of steer the boat back or prevent them from doing it every time.
Typically what I do in those situations, and that is more frequent than you would think, even among people who are communication professionals, that can happen when you're giving a presentation. So typically what I do is I always thank the person for their question. If there is a way for me to take something from the question and respond to it in terms that it relates to my purpose, or then I will do that. If I can't, I will thank them. I will tell them it's kind of outside the scope. I'd be happy to have a one-on-one conversation, but I'm typically not going to engage. So, and that might be something that takes a little time getting used to doing, but I think your best approach there is to either try and address some piece of what they asked as it relates to what you're talking about, or table it and say that you're happy to have a discussion one-on-one, but it's kind of outside the scope of your purpose in that moment. That's a perfectly acceptable thing to do. You would not be viewed as unprofessional for doing that.
So I don't know if you have a little spiel about this, but I oftentimes when I tell people that I'm a communications major, or even my parents, the reaction is oh, that's such a fluff degree, you just talk with everyone, don't you? Do you have a way to do that, to present that differently, concisely?
Do I personally? Well, I think one of the things I would say, that is a great question. One of the things I would say is, and I've actually used this before, so with DVMs and with engineers. So a lot of what they do is very standardized. They have procedures for how to do a surgery, right? Procedures for how you're going to come up with the calculations for a project. And I always tell people, actually, I find communication to be much more rigorous and much more challenging and requires a greater level of skill and expertise than any of these because we deal with human beings. And human beings are inherently unpredictable. So it's always a moving target. So it is incredibly challenging and difficult, and it requires a skill set that is very sophisticated and highly developed. That's at a general level how I respond to that. And I appreciate you asking that question because I think sometimes that's the assumption about communication.
Yeah.
And so I always try and shift that and say, no, it's actually much more challenging because humans are not the same. Every single person in this room is different, and that adds to the difficulty level there. Mm-hmm. I mean, that is not specific to who you are,
Right.
But I would encourage you, and I actually told Brendan that I would share this, and he can share it with everyone if he wants. I actually have